All right, it is 2 o'clock here in Sweden, and welcome to everyone joining this webinar. I just heard that the chat was disabled, but now it has been enabled. So everyone who's here who's joined us today, a warm welcome to you, and please say hello in the chat and share where you're joining us from today. I see Visby, Sweden already. That's a colleague of ours. So welcome also to ICLD colleagues, of course. This webinar will discuss local democracy and resilience in Ukraine, and we will also relate that to what other countries can learn from the Ukrainian experience and the incredible resilience that Ukrainian local governments have showed, and everyone working together with local governments. We have 5 fantastic panelists today, and we have a quite packed program, actually, so I will not be talking very much, except for introducing myself, and then, of course, the participants and the panelists. We will be quite strict on time today, so it is just 1 minute past 2, but I see everyone is very on time here. We're already 56 listeners here, so we will just go ahead. My name is Clara Orstadius. I work as a research officer at ICLD, mainly concerned with connecting research and practice at our knowledge center at ICLD. Joining us from ICLD today, I also have our Secretary General, Johan Lilja, who will give us a few welcoming words. So please, Johan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Clara, and good afternoon. Welcome to this exciting webinar at ICLD. As said, my name is Johan Lilja. I'm the Secretary General at ICLD. We truly live in a changing and challenging world. And what we thought was a solid ground under our feet just a few months ago is now completely new conditions for collaboration, development, global security. And the future for us all is very unpredictable and very uncertain. And that goes without saying for Ukraine, of course. But there is one thing that is rock solid true, and that is all problems and challenges, and to paraphrase my role model Nelson Mandela, are created by humans, and it requires humans with a strong moral compass, and it requires humans that believes in a human rights perspective to make a difference. So that's why I'm so excited that we have those panelists with us today. Regardless of the challenges the world is facing, we at ICLD are convinced that to make a better and a sustainable world, democracy is the key. ICLD works closely with local governments to create change that benefits their local citizens. In the light of this, the question of crisis preparedness and local democracy is, of course, highly prevailing. What can local governments learn from Ukraine's crisis management, building resilient communities through local democracy? Through SALAR, Sweden has contributed to an increasingly strong decentralization in Ukraine. But what we in turn can get back and perhaps learn from what we have seen in Ukrainian municipalities, and that they have really shown exceptional crisis management and capabilities during the war through local self-government, collaboration with civil society, and effectiveness of local solutions. So this webinar seeks to share Ukraine experiences with an international audience like yourself, local government representatives, policymakers, civil society actors. It aims to explore how local governments worldwide can preserve and build democratic values and community trust, which is so important, while strengthening their crisis management and strategies. What can we learn from these examples in Ukraine? That is what we can listen to more today, so I look forward to that. But no welcoming speech without a Nelson Mandela quote, and that is, it's in your hands to create a better world for all who lives in it. And once again, welcome to listen to this qualified and interesting panelists. Thank you. Over to you, Clara.
Thank you very much, Johan. And I will back up the tape and say a few things that I should have said in the introduction. because we have interpretation for between Ukrainian and English language. So make sure that if you're listening in, choose which language you want to listen to this webinar to. At your bottom row, you have a choice between English and Ukrainian. So make your choice there and you will hear our fantastic interpreter help out whenever needed. You are always welcome to post questions in the chat during and after the panelists have spoken. Like I said, we have a quite packed schedule. We will start with a presentation by Oleksandra Keudel, who has been leading a research project in collaboration with ICLD that have produced results that merit a lot of discussion, which I hope we will have today, and it has happened and it will continue to happen for a long time. And whatever questions come up when you're listening to this, please feel free to write them in the chat. After that, we have 4 panelists speaking for about 10 minutes each. And after that, we will have a question and answer session. This means that we may not be able to address every question that comes up, but we will do our best to answer as many of them as possible, and nothing goes unnoticed for sure. All right, and with that, I will give the floor to Oleksandra Keudel, who is an associate professor at Kyiv School of Economics, and like I said, has been working with ICLD for a lot of years now, I think about 6 years, and will continue to do so, at least for another year in one new project. So we are very excited to hear about the key takeaways from the one that has just finished. Over to you, Oleksandra.
Thank you very much, Clara, for the introductions. And I am very grateful to be here, especially in the company of the 2 Ukrainian mayors, Bogdan and Iryna. It is their experiences that have largely informed this research that we have been doing since 2022 with the team that you see on the screen at Kyiv School of Economics. We are also very grateful for ICLD for this very careful approach to the very sensitive approach to knowledge sharing. And also very sustainable approach, because we have been privileged to speak at different ICLD democracy talks starting from 2022, and I thank you very much for letting this experience be shared. I'm also very, very excited to see here local governments from many continents. Thank you very much for your interest, and let's go ahead. Before I move to methodology about this research, just for some context. So as you all know, in 2022, Ukraine has experienced a full-scale Russian invasion. That means a continuation of its aggression against Ukraine, which had started already in hybrid forms in 2014. And Ukraine has shown that it was remarkably and unpredictably resilient. And we have established that part of the civilian resistance and resilience was the structure of the local self-governments that had been formed prior to this during so-called decentralization reforms. I will not bother you with the details of this, but the main takeaway is that the reform has created the local units, which are called hromadas, and they are responsible for public service provision at the local level. They have certain fiscal autonomy, and they have also elected leaders, the mayors and the councils. And so starting from 2022, we have been researching and found that these local authorities and hromadas as units have been institutional elements of Ukrainian resilience on a civilian side, so to say. So I will now present some of the results of our research. Just to give you a bit of a methodology background, it is a survey-based research. We have surveyed 181 municipalities or hromada leaders in Ukraine out of about 1,400. We have cooperated with the All Ukrainian Association of Local Governments. It's called Association of Amalgamated Territorial Communities, and several NGOs to get our survey out. As you could see, that is a distribution of how many responses we got from each region. We also have done previous surveys to which we could compare our results in 2024, and we also have led interviews and focus groups. So what do we found? How does local democracy feature in the crisis response of Ukrainian municipalities and specifically their local governments? We have asked why did they engage, for what purposes they engage citizens during their full-scale invasion. And we find two main purposes. One is crisis management, because citizen engagement actually helps attract material resources. And maybe Bogdan, maybe he will be talking about it a little bit. I don't know, but they have good examples. And also citizen engagement helps circulate necessary information and needs. For example, when you cooperate with NGOs who in their turn help internally displaced people, they can also collect their needs and communicate the needs to the local authority. And without this help, it is much harder for a local authority to collect these needs themselves. And we have seen, we have done similar survey in 2021, and you could see how attracting material resources through public engagement actually has grown up. And that very much affects also cooperation with businesses. They have become very critical in acquiring additional resources to all kinds of crises that local authorities endure. It is internal displacement, it is energy, blackouts, water supply, many others. But the second point, which was perhaps not so self-evident, something you think about right away, is the question of legitimacy. We found that especially the goal for preventing the goal of engaging citizens in order to for showing that local authority is supporting anti-corruption action has increased between 2021 and 2022. You see quite growth, and has kept like this in 2024. And indeed, transparency is very important, because when you also a war has caused the introduction of the so-called martial law, and martial law says that you can't have any elections. So electoral accountability is not there, but you still need to keep this trust of your citizens, because you're fighting together, you resist together ultimately. That's why this legitimacy is actually very, has become important point for our respondents. And also we see the democratic character, that inclusion of diverse opinions, a very interesting trajectory. So when in 2022, we actually saw a drop of including citizens for getting these diverse opinions, it was because you needed to solve the crisis. It was here and now. The diversity didn't mean so much. But as we are longer in the state of martial law and war, this becomes important again. So this legitimacy issues, which can be addressed via public engagement. Now I will go through several tools and examples of how the citizens are actually engaged. Some of you may be familiar with the Council of Europe classification of public engagement that starts with informing, goes up to consultations, then to dialogue, and then partnership. And that is how I will structure now our results. So in terms of public informing, we see very much emphasis on digital communication. Local authorities inform people via social media, messengers, even chatbots. And some even create digital maps, which they actually adopt from what used to be a map of schools, for example. They could be adopted to a map of bomb shelters. And we saw that entrepreneurs and internally displaced people have become new target audiences that are relevant for the authorities. Next is public consultations. Here on the picture, you see a picture of one of the so-called internally displaced people councils. It is an advisory body which many Ukrainian local authorities have introduced. importantly, some of them introduced it even before it became mandatory from the government side. And that is because these people are relevant, the IDPs are relevant, and there is a growing demand to be part of the policy that affects them. But also we see that local authorities recognize this demand. And also entrepreneurs, again, are those people who, from whom even local authorities actively seek any inputs. Now moving on to public dialogue, we have noticed a very interesting trend towards more responsiveness to feedback. It's actually one of the basic premises of a democracy. If citizens can not only participate or say something, but if authorities act upon and provide the feedback. So these feedback loops are critical, and we see that it actually works. In some points, with slight drop in 2022, we're going back to some are even growing. But here I want to again say that entrepreneurs become a very relevant group because it is actually connected to attracting material resources. Ukrainian businesses have been very active in supporting also humanitarian response and supporting crisis response with material goods. We have explored one case where, my favorite case actually, it is a chicken producer who has had chickens, provided these to the place where internally displaced people are living compactly. And another company who had refrigerators gave them so that this compact living house could store these frozen chickens. So you could see this cooperation between local authority and the local business on providing essentially food to the internally displaced people. Also, IGP's feedback is getting an importance. We also know a speciality of Ukrainian context is many people are very active on social media, and they give their feedback to the local authorities, whether asked or not. Sometimes it is a little bit, it's not always very pleasant. People talk all kinds of things, but as researchers, what's important for us is that local authorities monitor it and they react and they adjust their policies accordingly. And what is very interesting is what we would call a democratization of knowledge. If you look at this, both of the slides with expert involvement, we could see that especially in 22, it's blue line here and here, their exchange with views of them and their influence has dropped significantly. And now it is coming a little bit higher, but it's not still the same as it was in 2021. And we understand it, or our interpretation, of course, experts need cause resources. They are expensive, and local people actually have been volunteering and giving this local knowledge to solve whatever the local repercussion of the war was to solve. And now moving to, I would say, a stellar example of what local democracy can achieve is a partnership to respond to the war-related crisis. Here you see a picture which shared with me one of the volunteers from Novovolynsk. It is a hub that they had in the first couple of months of the full-scale invasion. And it was a place where local authority volunteers coordinated humanitarian trucks to go all the way to the east of Ukraine to support people with different humanitarian goods. And these trucks were coming from Poland and even further west, from West Europe. And you could see this is a completely self-organized, self-governed structure, which over time became a so-called volunteer hub and still has activities in supporting people who have a need. So they are also evolving. There are also very interesting examples of business supporting response. For example, in Ukraine has a rehabilitation ecosystem, which is based in Lviv. It's called Unbroken. Maybe some of you heard about it. And its supervisory board includes the IT cluster of the city. So the IT business is systematically and substantially involved in acquiring funds to support the Unbroken Rehabilitation Center. It's a great it's a format of a formalized partnership to respond to the large-scale crisis and health needs. Now, of course, all these communication, cooperation is not without challenges. We asked local authorities about what kind of challenges or negative consequences they have experienced. And you could see the numbers here, that emotional stress is what many have experienced, the overload of responsible employees and excessive politicization of the issues. Interestingly, for us as researchers, none of these are specifically war-related consequences. We have data from 2021 that shows that they already were important, but in the war context, it is also exacerbated. So there are different war experiences. Many people experience trauma. There are some data show that there are between 30 and 40% of Ukrainian population suffering from the post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a lot, and also displacement. So there are challenges. Nevertheless, when we zoom out, we can say that how local democracy supports societal resilience is because the practices that constitute transparency, participation, accountability, because mutual trust has been built even before the full-scale invasion, and we do have data supporting it, it helps people collaborate across sectors. So local authority, businesses, NGOs, just active citizens, they are able to cooperate, and that transfers knowledge, resources, innovation. And supported by digital technologies, this results in both the opportunities for adaptation to the crisis and to the anticipation. So even thinking together what can be done. And from the experience of Ukrainian local authorities, we devise 3 key lessons, which we believe are relevant beyond the context of Ukraine. So first, the modern crises are so complex that it is too naive to think that a central government alone can solve any of this. So local self-government authorities that are empowered, that they have financial competences, that they have a social service provision competences. So empowered local authorities are partners for central authorities in solving for war-related crises. Why? Because they can provide context-specific solutions. Very simple. Someone in Washington, D.C. cannot know what is happening in, I believe someone was from Frankfurt here today, right? So it is this contextual knowledge. And second, we have to think about in crisis, it is important to coordinate. So a lot of literature says that the natural tendency is to centralize, to cut unnecessary consultations, to make some central bodies that can tell them what to do. But again, it is normally not working. So the better response is actually coordination rather than centralization when you have local authorities that are able to manage local repercussions of the crisis. Second learning is collaborative crisis response, which I described here. It needs conditions to flourish. It does not come on its own. So you need to plan crisis response with residents. It's actually one of the things Ukraine could do better, because a lot of cooperation became on the spot ad hoc without pre-planning about who can do what. And here I just want to say that it's not possible to plan step by step what can be done. What you can do is, however, is plan how you coordinate when whatever unknown will happen. Second point, how to create conditions, invest in physical community spaces. We have statistically significant data that shows that the more physical spaces like hubs, youth centers, business support centers, youth council or community centers Ukrainian municipality had, the more it was able to better be prepared and better respond to the crisis. Also, this communication needs so-called facilitators, that is people, but also institutions. Ukrainian experience shows that there are such institutions as city institutes. These are sort of project management, grant acquiring institutions that have been able to mobilize a lot of social capital around them. And so think which kind of institutions in your municipality do that and invest in them. And finally, this communication I described does not have to be the responsibility of local authority. You can think about many other actors in your community who can do the same job. Is there maybe a teacher who loves facilitating things with their students? Is there maybe a librarian or library institution or some other place and people who could also facilitate communication? And instead of working directly with all residents, you could work with them and create a network of networks, because you also don't want to stretch yourself. And finally, but not least important, is digital preparedness is essential. What we see from Ukrainian experience, I'm sorry. What we see from Ukrainian experience is that digital tools have been very critical in facilitating communication, but not all people actually use them. So you have to think about who do you cover and who you don't cover. Plus, the cybersecurity is a huge issue when you have all the digital tools. So data backups are essential, protection of cyber infrastructure, cyber crashes tests, working with hackers who can help you test your infrastructure. That is actually very important, needs to be thought of. So to finalize my presentation, the experience of Ukraine is experience of resilience in terms of adaptation and agility. It's not so much preparedness, actually, but it shows that local democracy and the connections between the community and within communities, they can help overcome some gaps of preparedness. And knowing that we will face more and more unknown crises, we actually have to think not about very strict procedural preparedness, but rather about how do we as a community can be so flexible and agile so that we could respond to different kinds of crises. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Oleksandra, for that wonderfully insightful presentation. And there are actually some questions in the chat already. I think at least one of them about the role of local authorities and how they can be empowered to actually take the lead in these types of crises and not be usurped by international donor organizations and national governments. That question will be at least partly addressed by the other speakers, I believe. But please do have a look in the chat, Oleksandra, and see if there's something to come back to after the rounds of presentations. Meanwhile, we are honored to have our next speaker. Mayor Bogdan Kelichavyi is the mayor of Kopycyntsi, sorry for my pronunciation, Gromada. And he is also having a strong role in the All-Ukrainian Association of Amalgamated Communities, which means that Bogdan has the experience of being at the forefront of this decentralized response to the war, to the polycrisis, but also involved in coordination between local governments and in relation to central actors. So I believe, Bogdan, you will have a lot to teach us about crisis response. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you a lot. I think I also have to thank to ICLD for this great opportunity for us to communicate together, and not for me, it's a pleasure to learn from you, because it's a lot of expertise, and with this platform we can get connected with the best experts, and we can share our knowledge, just learn from each other's experiences and also from the research. And thank you, thanks to Oleksandra, the previous speaker, because some people have to do the research and some people have to do the practical things, and we learn from each other. It's very useful for us to cooperate. I would also like to elaborate a little bit about decentralization and crisis response from the local governance and also from the civil society point of view. And I would like to say that because of the decentralization reform, and right now we are explaining it and trying to understand it from different angles. Because of that reform, we have the situation when local governments in Ukraine became more capable than it was expected from them to deal with the crisis situation caused by the Russian war aggression. And I would say one of the simplest explanations would be that after the Soviet Union was collapsed, there was a lot of crisis times in Ukraine as well, and we got the leftover of the previous local governance structure, which was mostly vertical and administrations driven. In sometimes administrations and executive powers from the very top to very bottom are effective in the longer run, but they're less flexible, less resilient to change. That's why our local governance and things on ground were quite stagnated, and that's why a lot of people started to take the initiative and form different civil society organizations to fix some problems or some issues that were supposed to be fixed by the local governance, because the local administrations were not capable of that. And then when 11 years ago, our decentralization reform started, when our government, together with the national experts, gave more opportunity to the local governments to give them more capabilities, more resources, just created a totally different model of local governance, which is quite similar to the Swedish one, I must say, learning more and understanding how much similar we are comparing to other local governance in other countries. This would take to the situation that we had a transition from, and it's quite typical of people from civil society to local governance. This is my story, and I would say that representing Association of Local Amalgamated Communities in Ukraine, this is the typical story of most of the mayors or deputy mayors or high level managers in the municipalities, that they came from private business or they came from civil society organizations, when they had to learn how to do or fix things by themselves. And this decentralization reform and local municipalities became like a space where they can formalize and structurize the experience, the knowledge, and even bring it to a higher level. Right now, we're also living in the situation when we still have the administrations on a regional and on a district level. They have less functions right now, but we still try to coordinate and try to learn from each other. And sometimes, as I said, administrations are better, but if we're talking about longer run, it's much better to work with municipalities. So regarding the full-scale invasion, I just got 30 when the war started, and together with even being located in the western part of Ukraine, which is much safer comparing to others, we had to deal with a lot of things. And crisis situation is called crisis mainly because so many things are happening at the same time, and you have to manage them all at the same time, using your team, stretching your hours, sacrificing your sleep. But I think most of the municipalities, they did a really good job. And typical things that we had to deal with would be how to help and assist military organizations to ensure the conscription campaigns. Also, how to form local territorial defense units. This was also not easy. How to make these volunteers, scared people who would like to form some kind of unit that would protect your community, your municipality. Also, being located in the western part of Ukraine, maybe it would be less of a crisis, but we also experienced the influx of internal displaced people. We had to find them where they could stay, find them shelter, find them food, and further and further we had to integrate people. So right now I cannot imagine my municipality without internal displaced people. They're everywhere. They're doing a lot of things and they're pretty well integrated, but this is also requires a lot of effort, and you have to be prepared, or as Oleksandra said, be flexible enough to react. We also had to react at the blackout situations because there were times we didn't have enough electricity, but we had to ensure that we have communication, that we have internet, that we have mobile network. Even for the mobile network, we had to find out the system how we can locally power source some of our mobile towers when the batteries were running out, so we could still have a mobile network and cooperate with other municipalities and coordinate with them. We also had to deal with the businesses relocations and how to rescue businesses from the war zone. In my municipality as well, we have one factory that was relocated from the war zone, almost completely destroyed, people risking their lives trying to rescue some of the equipment they had. And it's also a great case, and it's not only in my municipality. I can talk about each of these topics for so many minutes. But what is also important is international cooperation. If you have met any of Ukrainian mayor or representative of any municipality, they would probably be very happy to talk to you about international cooperation. How can municipalities get together? How they can find some solutions? How they can exchange the experience? In our case, we also are happy that our partner municipality is here in Sweden, in Skåne, and even right now, I'm in one of the events waiting for our dear friends from our partner municipality, and we're gonna have a program for 2 more days together. This is really important, not only from the experience exchange point of view, but it's also important from the perspective of just having the feeling that you're not alone, that you are dealing with this massive crisis, massive war and aggression, which is unfair. Every Ukrainian feels and knows it's unfair, but we try to fight against that. We try to protect Europe. We try to protect democratic values, and we also try to protect the local governance, because without democracy, there would be no local governance existing. So it's really, really important for us that we have this support, that we feel not alone, and that we can, despite paying the highest price right now, paying the lives of our people and families, we still can think about development and some future plans in a free world together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those fantastic remarks. I noticed you picked up on Oleksandra's words of both prepared and flexible, and that is really a lot to ask of anyone. And I saw Iryna nodding a little bit as well to the words of handling many things at the same time. I'm guessing you recognize yourself in that too. And with those words, we are equally honored to hand over to Mayor Iryna Pletnova, who is the mayor of Uman Municipality. And as a mayor, I am assuming you have as many crises to deal with.
Я представляю місто Умань, яке знаходиться в центрі України на перехресті 5 доріг. І з початку повномасштабного вторгнення через наше місто проїхала велика кількість біженців, які і надалі залишилися проживати в нашому місті. З початку повномасштабного вторгнення через місто Умань проїхало 138 тисяч біженців. На даний час зареєстровано і обліковано в нашому місті 15,6 тисяч внутрішньопереміщених осіб. З них понад 3,5 тисячі чоловіків. І більше 2 тисяч – це чоловіки працездатного віку. Це понад 7,5 тисяч осіб, жінок, і знову ж таки більше 5,5 тисяч – це жінки працездатного віку. Це 4,5 дітей, з них 33 дітей-інвалідів. Це 3210 осіб похилого віку і 686 людей з інвалідністю. І ми можемо говорити, ці цифри – це тільки про тих людей, які обліковані. На жаль, не кожна людина, яка приїхала проживати і знайшла прихисток в нашому місті, обліковується і стає на облік як внутрішньопереміщені. Які ж програми діють в нашому місті з початку повномасштабного вторгнення? Це реалізується програма інтеграції внутрішньопереміщених осіб в Уманській міській територіальній громаді на 2023-2025 роки. Утворено координаційний центр підтримки цивільного населення. При виконавчому комітеті нашої Уманської міської ради створено раду з питань внутрішньопереміщених осіб. До речі, цю раду було створено ще до того, як започатковано на державному рівні. Створено міжвідомчий координаційний штаб щодо дотримання прав, свободи та законних інтересів внутрішньопереміщених осіб. Діє в нашому місті такий соціальний хаб, як Авдіївка, вільні люди, так було, так буде. І з містом Авдіївкою ще в 2022 році було підписано із військовою адміністрацією меморандум про співпрацю, і ми приймали їхніх людей. На даний час у нас ще підписано такий же меморандум із Часовим Яром, із Донецькою обласною військовою адміністрацією. Тому в таких напрямках дуже тісно співпрацюємо. В місті забезпечуємо житлом внутрішньопереміщених осіб. З початку повномасштабного вторгнення в нашій громаді наша громада стала другою домівкою для сотні тисяч внутрішньопереміщених осіб. Понад 89 закладів міста надавали тимчасове житло, де розміщували внутрішньопереміщених в 12 закладах соціального захисту. До речі, в перші дні повномасштабного вторгнення місто приймало тільки на ночівлю десь орієнтовно по 15 тисяч людей. Наразі за розпорядженням Черкаської обласної військової адміністрації в Уманській міській територіальній громаді затверджено 4 заклади управління праці та соціального захисту населення Уманської міської ради, де створено 193 місця для тимчасового перебування внутрішньопереміщених. В рамках програми інтеграції внутрішньопереміщених осіб в Уманській міській територіальній громаді на 23-25 роки за кошти міського за кошти нашого міського бюджету було придбано 2 квартири для тимчасового проживання внутрішньопереміщених осіб. У 2021 році, до речі, була також ще 1 квартира придбана. По програмі прихисток за весь період розміщено 2301 особу внутрішньопереміщену в домогосподарствах, це звичайних мешканців, за які власники житла отримують компенсацію, спрямовано кошти за даним напрямком, 14,5 мільйонів гривень відшкодовано за проживання внутрішньопереміщених. Місця тимчасового проживання. На сьогодні пріоритетними питаннями щодо соціальної політики і підтримки сімей внутрішньопереміщених осіб є надання їм місця для тимчасового проживання. Всього в наших закладах соціального захисту тимчасово проживає понад 500 осіб. На даний час 313 внутрішньопереміщених, з них 197 – це люди, які проживають в будинку ветеранів, та 116 чоловік – це в соціальних готелей. І серед цих дітей серед цих людей 41 дитина. Забезпечення внутрішньопереміщених осіб освітніми та медичними послугами. В закладах освіти комунальної форми власності Уманської міської ради навчається 871 дитина з числа внутрішньопереміщених. З них у закладах дошкільної освіти 139, у закладах середньої освіти 517 і професійна освіта – це 60 осіб. І вищу освіту здобувають у наших вищих навчальних закладах 155 дітей. 189 дітям з числа ВПО встановлено статус дитини, яка постраждала внаслідок воєнних дій. Первинна медична допомога надається лікарями нашого комунального некомерційного підприємства Уманська міська центральна первинна медико-санітарна допомога. Усім внутрішньопереміщеним особам за їхніми зверненнями забезпечено направлення на діагностичні та лабораторні дослідження, консультації лікарів-спеціалістів та виписку рецептів за допомогою програми «Доступні ліки». В центрі зайнятості зареєстровані як безробітні 56 внутрішньопереміщених осіб. В минулому році працевлаштовано 16% із тих, хто перебував на обліку. Всього працевлаштовано 199 осіб. За сприяння служби зайнятості 28. Пройшли професійне навчання та влаштувалися за професією 5 осіб. Суб'єкти господарювання, які почали підприємницьку діяльність, 2 людей. Соціальний захист – 21 особа. Робітничі професії, такі як кухар, двірники, підсобні робітники – це 56 людей. В закладах освіти працює 35 людей, керівники, економісти, бухгалтера – 12 осіб, в охороні здоров'я – це 22 людини, лікарі і середній медичний персонал, і в юридичній сфері 8 осіб. Навіть якщо взяти нашу Уманську міську раду, в нас працює 6 людей, які перейшли з інших органів місцевого самоврядування. Так, на водоканалі ми маємо зараз кваліфікованого головного інженера, який в Херсоні очолював водоканал, має великий гарний досвід, і ми задоволені тим, що маємо таких кваліфікованих працівників, можемо залучити. Те ж саме стосується в медицині лікарів. От, до речі, цих людей стараємося забезпечити службовим житлом. Таким службовим житлом нас забезпечено декілька осіб. Так. В місті ми вже говорили про те, що діє хаб Авдіївка «Вільні люди», так було, так буде, і укладені меморандуми із цими військовими адміністраціями. Постійно проводяться в місті заходи для дітей внутрішньопереміщених, долучаються до роботи клуби дитячий разом із волонтерами та фахівцями із соціальної роботи, управління праці та соціального захисту населення нашої міської ради. ЮНІСЕФ спільно також працювали в 23-му році протягом десь 6-7 місяців. В місті надзвичайно розвинуто інклюзивний соціально-реабілітаційний туризм. При відділенні інклюзивно-соціально-реабілітаційного туризму Центра інтегрованих соціальних послуг постійно організовує для внутрішньопереміщених осіб, і в тому числі і маломобільних, різні екскурсії. До речі, наше місто-побратим з Каліфорнії Девіс забезпечило наше управління соціального захисту в минулому році автобусом для 8 місць візочників. І таким чином ми можемо забезпечити туризмом із внутрішньопереміщених людей з інвалідністю. Є реабілітаційний центр «Гармонія», який відвідують не тільки уманчани і військовослужбовці, а і люди внутрішньопереміщені. Цикл занять з ментального здоров'я постійно проводиться. Рада ВПО у співпраці з соціальним хабом Умань, Авдіївка, вільні люди. Так було, так буде. І громадською організацією міський центр ініціатив службою первинного соціально-психологічного консультування Уманської міської ради, ветеранським хабом «Сильні духом» проводять цикл занять з підтримки ментального здоров'я для внутрішньопереміщених осіб, осіб похилого віку, дітей, дружин та матерів військовослужбовців. В місті діє центр життєстійкості. В центр може звернутися кожен мешканець громади, в тому числі і внутрішньопереміщені, тому вибачте, що я називаю внутрішньопереміщені, але це вже люди, які є мешканцями нашого міста, і ми так розуміємо, що більшості з них, на жаль, не буде куди повертатися. Тому це вже наші уманці. Вони повинні інтегруватися в звичайне життя нашого міста і бути просто нашими громадянами. Їм надається обов'язково психологічна допомога, індивідуальне психологічне консультування, інформування та консультування щодо соціальних послуг, які є, скерування до потрібних служб і організацій, участь у заходах психосоціальної підтримки та навчання стресостійкості, стабілізації фізичного та ментального стану, заняття йогою, іншими видами спорту. І є група у Вайбері із внутрішньопереміщених осіб, яка співпрацює з управлінням соціального захисту, де інформують про всі заходи, які відбуваються в місті, не тільки для внутрішньопереміщених, а і для жителів, для мешканців нашої громади, де люди можуть брати участь і інтегруватися в звичайне життя. Уманська міська територіальна громада одна із перших війшла до переліку надавачів соціальних послуг, що пройшли відбір з реалізації експериментального проєкту з організації надання внутрішньопереміщеним особам похилого віку, особам з інвалідністю соціальних послуг стаціонарного догляду та підтриманого проживання за принципом «гроші ходять за людиною». Для реалізації експериментального проєкту у відділенні денного перебування та підтриманого проживання визначено 8 таких місць, в будинку ветеранів 35 ліжкомісць. Надання адресної, натуральної та грошової допомоги. Внутрішньопереміщені особи відповідно до своїх потреб користуються послугами відділення благодійної діяльності Центру інтегрованих послуг. У нас є такий соціальний магазин, куди люди можуть прийти, взяти ті речі, які вони потребують. Отримуємо ми цю допомогу або ж від наших міст-побратимів, або за якимись грантами, або звичайні уманці надають речі, чи то продукти харчування, те, що є залишки, і вони їм не потрібні, скажімо, це можна звернутися до такого центру. І в даному ж центрі є соціальний кошик, де можна і придбати продукти харчування, але без націнки, і вони доволі таки по низьким цінам.
Соціальний кошик,
Називається він у нас соціальний кошик. Ну, я так от ніби коротко постаралася розказати, як воно діє. Ну і співпраця з міжнародними та вітчизняними організаціями – це обов'язково з метою надання такої допомоги внутрішньопереміщеним особам. Ми співпрацюємо з міжнародними та вітчизняними організаціями. Це благодійний фонд «SCEEUS» з перших днів війни з нами. УБК ООН, Благодійний фонд «Право на захист», благодійна організація «Вплив», МОМ, Дитячим фондом ООН ЮНІСЕФ, Благодійним фондом «Збережи Україну», Благодійним фондом «Український центр допомоги», громадською організацією «Крок до успіху», міськрайонна організація Червоного Хреста, волонтери міста. І завдяки такій вагомій допомозі міжнародних організацій міст-побратимів, так як місто Умань має велику кількість міст-побратимів, це 25 міст, не кожне місто в Україні може, скажімо, таким поділитися досвідом. От, і з початку повномасштабного всі міста включилися в благодійну допомогу якраз нашим. За цей період одяг та взуття надано було більше 6 тисяч осіб. Продуктовими наборами понад 12 тисяч осіб забезпечено. Санітарно-гігієнічними наборами 4 тисячі особи. Дитячим харчуванням понад 800 осіб. Більше 6,5 тисячі осіб отримували гаряче харчування, обіди. І до цього часу ми продовжуємо гарячими обідами при управлінні соціального захисту кормити тих людей, які цього потребують. І близько 200 осіб щодня можуть прийти і безкоштовно пообідати. Ну, отакий досвід в нашому місті Умані.
Скажіть, бо це важливо. Що дітям з числа ВПО?
Крім того, наше місто-побратим Девіс із Каліфорнії в минулому році заключили такий меморандум із університетом, педагогічним університетом і Уманською міською радою. І вже протягом другого року ми виплачуємо від міста Девіс стипендії дітям внутрішньопереміщеним, які навчаються в нашому університеті. Вони отримують щомісячно 2000 гривень таку допомогу. Запрошуємо в наше місто. Ну і дякую за увагу.
Хто каже, симфонеція.
Thank you very much for that rich and detailed description of what is happening on the ground. It is incredibly useful for other local governments and in other countries to know what the situation is like on the ground. Thank you very much. And for the next speaker, we're moving on to Mariya, Tuzyk, who we know very well at ICLD, and who is also involved in these kinds of humanitarian support projects in many different local governments, and I think has quite a broad view on that and can share many experience of the collaborative governance that happens in the cooperation between a municipality and NGOs and other organizations. And in the interest of time, may I ask the remaining panelists to stick to the 10 minutes. Thank you very much. And Mariya, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Clara. As Clara mentioned, that I have been involved in international cooperation efforts, and I have been working with ICLD on the Democratic Resilience Program, working with Swedish-Ukrainian partnerships for over the past year. And from the beginning of the full-scale invasion, I have also been involved in humanitarian relief efforts, working for and with national NGOs in leading local-led initiatives mainly in western part of Ukraine. So in the areas that are known or were known as fairly more safer, and where we have also seen a very large influx of internally displaced persons. And what we just heard from Mayor Iryna Pletnova is just amazing results of their hard work, of their collaboration with different stakeholders, of the efforts of all of the community involved in trying to, first of all, host internally displaced persons, which now have been integrating quite well into the community. And so many of the other communities all over Ukraine, including in areas where I'm located, have been working very hard from the very first days. And from the very first days, what we saw was that international organizations that were already operating in Ukraine on development projects, they came to a complete stall because they had to worry about getting their workers out of the country. They had to worry about maybe stopping the project, stopping the efforts. If we talk about new international organizations, they were still kind of waiting out to see what's going to happen. It took about 2 to 3 months until many of the international organizations that worked in Ukraine or continue to work in Ukraine to this day began their full operations. And so in the very first period of the full-scale invasion, the first 2-3 months, municipalities really relied on the community members, on residents, on active civil society organizations, local grassroots organizations, on enterprises and businesses that were still trying to operate and that were operating in terms of providing all the necessary humanitarian relief materials and products needed to host new residents, to host new internally displaced persons, to house them, to provide them with whatever they needed, because what municipalities saw was that people came with nothing, with just their documents maybe, with their pets, with their families. Even a personal example of mine, a family came, and this was end of February, so it was winter, it was snow, and the woman, she didn't have, she only had slippers because she was awoken in the middle of the night. So I had the same shoe size and I provided a pair of boots for her because she had just slippers on her feet. And so in the beginning, really, the community had to come together to share whatever they had, to share the food, to share the resources in order to be able to help settle those people in the very first few days, whether they were transitioning through their community or whether they wanted to stay temporarily, or maybe they have been staying over the past 2-3 years in the community. So when international coordination organizations started to come into Ukraine and started to try to start their humanitarian relief programs, it was very important that they communicated with the municipalities, with the communities. And what we saw as part of a local national NGO is that many of the international organizations tried to go through either the national level or the regional level government in order to provide their programs in Ukraine. And what we saw was the very significant importance of localization of different programs, available programs. So what we were able to do as project managers, as experts from these local or national NGOs was to provide feedback on how, first of all, to implement these type of programs and projects in Ukraine, how to localize them based on context, because again, the context even within Ukraine differs from what the programs are available in Eastern Ukraine and South Ukraine, and what programs were in Western Ukraine. They differ even to this day. So it was important to also work through the coordination efforts through the UN cluster system, this allowed NGOs, civil society organizations, and municipalities to really figure out what the needs were. Because as was mentioned before, of course, the flexibility was very important, and the expertise and knowledge that came with the international organizations was also very important, but still they lacked a lot of different knowledge that was very important to transfer between the municipalities and the organizations. So in one case where the organizations could come to the community and figure and do the proper needs assessment to see what the needs of the community is, to the needs of the residents, to the needs of the different vulnerable groups, was important to see this from the international perspective or the national, for example, NGOs. But at the same time, for example, there was a lot of lack of information on the people that were in the community, because as was mentioned before, that many, of course, were registering that they have come to the community, that they need some sort of services to be provided. But many also did not register, and of course municipalities were able to know this information a little bit better. And so there was also a little bit of a difficulty to work through the regional offices, because they also lacked updated information. So what happened is that the communities, they provided the necessary information to be able to provide the necessary programs. And so I worked with different types of programs over the past 3 years. We've provided psychosocial support to internally displaced persons. We've provided educational catch-up classes to internally displaced persons. We've tried to involve internally displaced persons in providing this type of assistance. So we've tried to hire internally displaced persons so they would be able to provide this type of support to new internally displaced persons. So we understood that they are able to understand the needs better, and together with international organizations, we were able to harness the expertise. Together with the communities, we were able to get the relevant data and information needed based on the needs and provide these types of programs. And so what we see, of course, now when we talk about communities and the international cooperation efforts that I think all communities in Ukraine are trying to do right now, is that those communities that had some sort of sister cities in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they were able to reach out to them, and they were able to provide some sort of humanitarian aid. They were able to support them. But what we see now is that it's not only about the humanitarian support, but it's also the desire for the Ukrainian communities to give back to the international partners and to teach them about the resiliency efforts, to teach them about crisis management, to teach them on how to continue to support democratic values even amongst this full-scale war that is happening in Ukraine. And so these types of programs, such as ICLD, and are very important in terms of capacity building, in terms of building the capacity of municipal staff, of active community members, in order to give them the proper knowledge to help them when we're talking about the reconstruction of Ukraine. So of course, there's a lot of efforts that will be done and that are being done on a national level, but it's very important to see that the local governments are also involved when we're talking about the reconstruction of Ukraine, because they are able to really assess their efforts, they're able to assess their needs, and they're able to communicate what is needed to be done within their community. And again, an amazing presentation from Mayor Iryna Pletnova, because she really has shown in a very short time, and I'm sure that if we gave her more time, she would talk for more hours about the different efforts that have been done in her community. And this is an excellent example, and I can really truly say, by working with many other municipalities, that many other municipalities also have these types of results. And so it's it's important that these efforts, of course, are recognized. It's important that we use this information and this experience in order to build on these democratic values. And again, just to save time, I want to encourage this international cooperation between the Ukrainian communities, because they have a lot to share on how to be resilient during turmoil, during a crisis, to share with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariya. And I want to say to everyone that the capacity building efforts that ICLD is facilitating is also thanks to our mentors, of which Mariya is one, who help the communities in our programs. So we could not do it without you, Mariya, and your colleagues.
Thank you, Clara.
And now on to our final speaker. We have Andreas Umland. Andreas is an analyst at the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs, but based in Kyiv, as I understand. And so we have moved from what is going on very much on the ground in the municipalities by our mayors, and now heard a little bit wider perspective from Mariya and all the lessons that are to draw for other local governments elsewhere. And Andreas, I believe you have some things to teach us about how the debate is going on in other countries as well, and what other countries take away from the Ukrainian experiences and the results that are happening there. So over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. And I may just add that I've by now lived 20 years in Ukraine, although I'm German, and it so happened that I got teaching contracts in Ukraine. So I think I know, although I'm not Ukrainian and certainly not as competent as the Ukrainian speakers here, I know the situation a little bit and look at it a little bit also from outside. And I think that is perhaps also something that could be still mentioned to those of our listeners who are not from Ukraine. To the Ukrainians, this will sound rather trivial and perhaps self-explanatory, but what we have in Ukraine over the last 11 years is now a situation where a large decentralization is happening under, in a way, unique conditions. So we have a decentralization, first of all, that is clearly a municipalization. So it's a transfer of power, not so much to regions or to districts, but to local self-government. And often it's actually not so much a disempowerment of the center, but rather a disempowerment of regional administrations and so-called rayon administrations, which are then transferring their own prerogatives to the lowest level, to the so-called amalgamated territorial communities. And that is happening at a time when Ukraine is in war. The war started formally on the 20th of February 2014, when Russian troops started leaving the fleet base in Sevastopol and started occupying Crimea. But the war then did not yet lead to large-scale fighting, because the Ukrainian leadership decided to not defend Crimea against this occupation, but also on the advice of foreign leaders. This was then basically left without a military response, and there is a large discussion now about that in Ukraine. But what is important here is that only a few weeks after after Crimea is annexed, on 1st of April 2014, the decentralization reform starts, and only after the decentralization reform then starts, large-scale fighting breaks out in eastern Ukraine through Russia's covert intervention, paramilitary, you could say, intervention in eastern Ukraine. And then, of course, in 2022, this paramilitary, only partly regular invasion then becomes a full-scale invasion. And still, Ukraine remains a decentralized country and is now sort of still trying to uphold this system of local self-government under conditions of war. And I think this combination of factors makes it, I would say, almost unique experience. Certainly it is for Europe, and a unique experience, but it makes also, in a way, the dramatism of the situation in Ukraine makes it perhaps also particularly interesting for countries which also are in one way or another dramatic situations, and that also want to decentralize. The other aspect that I think makes this particular Ukrainian experience here so important is that it is quite explicitly not a federalization. So there has been a very long discussion, often with representatives of Western federations, about whether Ukraine should federalize and should become something like Switzerland or Germany or the US. And this has been rejected by Ukraine because such a federalization is a luxury that countries can only afford who do not have an expansionist neighbor like Ukraine has with Russia. And the federalization would certainly have generated then entry points for undermining the unity of the Ukrainian state. And that's why that is one of the reasons that Ukraine then has gone into this municipalization, which makes it, I think, also interesting. There's a large literature on the effects that decentralization can have on conflicts, that it can soothe conflicts, that decentralization can have an anti-separatist effect for countries that are suffering from regional differences, from regional conflicts. For Ukraine, I think that was eventually not so important. What was important was that paradoxically, in a certain way, decentralization then turned out to be a rather good preparation for the large-scale invasion, for the large war that started in 2022, although that was not the initial intention of the decentralization. Nevertheless, what then very quickly became clear in spring 2022, that actually these amalgamated territorial communities self-governing were a good structure with which to counteract the invasion by Russia. So these local self-governments, that has been already illustrated by in the presentations of Iryna, and also mentioned by Mariya, became then also partners for international organizations that wanted to help Ukraine. But of course, they as Iryna very well illustrated, they became very important for dealing with internally displaced persons. What has not been mentioned yet is that it turned out that these local self-governments became then also rather important actually for the military defense of Ukraine, and that in these local communities, in the areas that were affected directly by the war, there were created so-called territorial self-defense units, Samoobrona, the so-called, and often these local governments were then the initiator and organizer of these local territorial defense, which played in the early phase of the large-scale invasion an important role, not anymore to that extent today, but which also then is something that made Ukraine more resilient. Yet another aspect that may be also interesting for other countries is that Ukraine's decentralization happens at the same time when there is Europeanization, first through an association agreement and now through the candidacy, and that Ukraine's decentralization, which is sort of a part of the Europeanization, but not actually something that has been imposed on Ukraine from outside, like it happened actually with other reforms, where you had organizations like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the European Union that were sort of transposing almost institutions from the West into Ukraine. The decentralization reform was something rather that came from within, also with outside help, but was something genuinely Ukrainian, and also showed to the European partner countries that Ukraine is a country that fits into the EU, because most of the EU countries are decentralized countries. And so Ukraine became then, with this decentralization largely conceptualized within Ukraine, better equipped or better sort of compatible to for the European Union. This has also meant that there was already in peacetime, and now there is during the war more cooperation possible between European local communities and Ukrainian local communities. The city partnerships have already been mentioned. So that is also something that for other countries is perhaps important, is that when they decentralize themselves, they become then more compatible with other decentralized countries that may then have organizations in like the European Union that can help them then also in other ways. But there's also something Oleksandra has mentioned here also that don't want to comment here anymore, but just mention. Oleksandra mentioned the many effects that the decentralization had for the public administration on the or public policy, I should say, perhaps on the lowest level. There's also a large literature on the effects that decentralization can have for anti-corruption reforms, for the prevention, for the limitation, containment, so to say, of corruption through decentralization, when local communities become empowered and the often corrupt public administrations on the rayon, the district, or the regional, the oblast level, then are disempowered. Finally, the decentralization, I think, will also play a large role for the reconstruction. And what I actually expect is that there may be even a fight between the central government and the regional administrations and the local self-governments for the cooperation and for the funds that are going to come to Ukraine, and that there's going to be an argument to bring these funds directly to local communities, circumventing Kyiv. And there's going to be a tendency from Kyiv and from also the regional administration to get a hold of these funds. And here I think the thing that I've often heard in Kyiv is actually that the direct cooperation with local communities is better is preferable here. Finally, two questions that are emerging now for me here with the future of Ukraine's decentralization. What will be the effect of artificial intelligence for the sustainability and more effectiveness, higher effectiveness of local self-government? One of the big arguments against decentralization has always been the lacking expertise, the lacking resources, capabilities on the local level to develop projects, to administer projects, to report on projects. This has been partly solved with the amalgamation of the very small communities into larger communities that can better implement projects. And maybe artificial intelligence will actually, in the future, empower these local communities in that artificial intelligence can take over partly these tasks. And finally, what also against the background of what Iryna here mentioned is that Ukraine has now experienced a rather peculiar experience with integrating incoming people, the IDPs. And that is, of course, something that may be also important for the future of Ukraine, as many of the people who have left Ukraine may not return to Ukraine, and there may be then immigration happening in Ukraine. There may be work in Ukraine. There may be also an immigration policy. And some of the communities will have actually already experience with integrating people who come from outside, and they have now this experience from integrating IDPs. But these are rather open questions that I don't think are yet discussed broadly, but maybe also of interest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas, and thank you also for bringing us to the next questions and what to keep thinking of in the future. We don't have a lot of time left, but I want to give the floor back to Oleksandra to come back to a few questions that were posed right in the beginning. And I know Andreas also touched upon the role of local self-governments in the reconstruction, including the funding mechanisms and who access the funds. But Oleksandra, do you have a few more words to say on that perhaps? And then for the other panelists, please feel free to raise your hand for additional remarks before we finalize. Thank you.
Right. The question was how to ensure the leadership of the municipalities in reconstruction of their municipalities. And I fully agree with Andreas that the competition is already going on. So do not expect that someone will make it for the municipalities. You need to be proactive. And that means having projects ready for investment, that building your capacity to cooperate with foreign donors and investors and your sister cities. That is these facilitator institutions that I meant, project management offices or project managers. That is what you need to really think about, plus cooperation between municipalities. So some of the services that many of you want, for example, rehabilitation centers, cannot be maintained on the level of one municipality. But if you make a municipal cooperation and you apply together for establishing one rehabilitation center for several municipalities, that is a possibility to get funding for something like this, because it will be economically viable. And municipalities have to understand that they also need to do political advocacy, as for example, by having European Parliament having a special clause that that says that the reconstruction has to be including local authorities. That was a really good case of this kind of, using political advocacy for your cause. But it also means cooperating within Ukraine, not necessarily competing, knowing that you're on one cause, and cooperating with NGOs and activists who are also working on the questions of democratic reconstruction, like the coalition Rise Ukraine. So don't be alone, make coalitions, and be prepared to offer the investors real projects, and they have to be justified, data-driven, evidence, and working with your communities to get to these resources.
Thank you so much. And I think our final question came in the chat for an open question for the panel of communities who have lost a lot of their residents in the reconstruction process. How will they act to get people to come back? What kind of incentives, what kind of programs, what kind of mechanisms are there to help people or to support people who do wish to return once that is possible? Is there anyone who would like to reflect on this? Bogdan, I think you were first there.
I don't have to be first, but maybe Andreas would like to add. But we just had a conversation a few days ago in our community discussing how would we like to build a new children playground, and we were talking about should we do it the same way we did or other playgrounds are built, or should we take like more modern way inspired by cases what we saw in Sweden, including in Sweden. And one of the ideas was like we should build better so people who left they can see not only a sense of home in their municipalities, but also a same level of services that are provided to the citizens, and this hopefully would help us to return some of our people back.
Thank you. Andreas.
Yes, I'm currently in Germany, and there are many refugees from Ukraine in Germany. And frankly, my experience and my impression here is that many of them will not return when the war ends, and some will return, but often what has happened is that mothers have left with their children. The children have entered schools here. And they are then in the school process here, and it would be disrupting again their lives if they then would return. Some will return, but not many. I think what I already mentioned will have to happen is immigration, and I think that can happen. Currently, it looks rather fantastic. Who would immigrate in a country that is at a large-scale war? But don't forget that Ukraine is on its path to EU membership, and it will. The closer it gets to EU membership, the more attractive it will be, especially for citizens of the former Soviet Union, which are sort of more familiar with Ukraine because of this unhappy and involuntary but still common path that they have. And Ukraine will, I think, need these immigrants. And as I mentioned, actually, Ukraine has now the local communities have now quite some experience with integrating locally displaced person, and this experience with locally displaced persons may come in handy when you then have immigrants that you also have to integrate into your communities. I think that is a very touchy issue here, and I wouldn't perhaps start a discussion of these issues in Ukraine right now, but I think it's time to start talking about these issues. I think one has to talk about that, and Ukraine will need is the largest country, the largest all-European country. It will need people simply to run for the country to function.
Thank you very much. We are actually quite out of time. I will give the mic to Oleksandra for a last 30-second remark, and then we will have to wrap up for the day.
It's just based on our study on global Ukrainian community, and one of the simple ways is to keep connection to those who have left wherever they are. And there are municipalities who maintain a database of their people who are abroad. They offer them possibilities to be helpful while being abroad, and through building this relationship, it's possible once the situation changes, people may change also. It may change their incentives to return.
Mariya, please have your 30-second final remarks also.
Just a very, very final remark regarding coming back and regarding people returning. I think communities are already working on this. They're trying to continue to develop even amongst the war. They're trying to make their communities better, and they're trying to make sure that some, of course not all, will come back. And I'm actually the perfect case. My family immigrated. I went to school, I went to high school, I went to university abroad, and yet I came back. I came back because I saw how I can contribute to the rebuilding of Ukraine. I saw how I can make a difference in Ukraine. And so I think focusing, like Oleksandra mentioned, focusing on keeping in touch with the diaspora, keeping in touch with those who left, and showing them the opportunities that they could have in terms of helping Ukraine rebuild and rebuild better.
Thank you very much. And you actually really tie it together there with building back better by keeping in touch. And that also means by having a participatory approach to governance within the community. So keeping in touch with civil society organizations from authority side, keeping in touch with displaced communities. From ICLD's perspective, we really do like to speak about that it all comes down to participation in one way or another. With that, we have to wrap up for today. It has been incredible to hear all of you speak today. And thank you so much to everyone who's been listening in, who's been commenting, who's been asking questions. And I can only hope that this conversation can keep taking other forms in the future, and that we find many, many more occasions to speak together like this. You have contact details to ICLD, everyone who is here both as attendees and as panelists. Feel free to reach out with anything, and we will do everything we can to facilitate contacts and support you in any way that we are able to. This recording will be available on YouTube, not today and possibly not tomorrow either, but as soon as possible. And we will send out the recording to everyone who had registered for the webinar as well. So with that, have a lovely afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much.